The oppressed are just now making their voices heard. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and as the Overton window shifts so rapidly that leftists themselves are starting to admit the obvious and that maybe, gasp, Black people can be racist towards white people and women can be sexist towards men, there will be, for a while, a diehard set of professional activists and educators who will continue to double and triple down on their social justice rhetoric. Do these people truly believe what they are saying? Do they really believe that the only problematic thing about Joseph Stalin was the fact that he was a white male? Well, I don't know if that's super likely. Maybe they simply know perfectly well what professional game that they are playing and how to utilize it to their advantage to maintain a career in media, academia, or with politically funded activist organizing. At least if the game goes the way it has been for the past few decades. Still, unfortunately, a lot of people actually believe a number of the things that these people say, or even worse, actively want to believe the things that they say. And now that Trump is in office, isn't doing even a fraction of all the evil things that they said that he would, and the intersectional feminist activists are going to have to start pinching pennies, they're going to have to explain why they lost this round of the culture war. Thus, they are going to tell some version of the following to their rich donors, who are generally white people that live in places like Seattle and Berkeley, who don't actually spend a whole lot of time interacting with poor or minority communities, but want to believe that they are helping them by throwing thousands of dollars at organizations that claim to be helping said communities. Thanks to great strides from brave activists like Alicia Garza, Sean King, and DeRay McKesson, social media gave a voice to previously silenced, oppressed people living under white supremacy and patriarchy who got a chance to use Facebook and Twitter to birth an entire movement that changed a generation. But eventually, there was a white lash of Nazis that came and pushed back against progress. That is the type of thing that they are going to say to continue to try to explain why exactly the icky orange Republican came along and ended their jig. And they've said so much in numerous different ways over the years already, both by proclaiming that minority voices allegedly just recently started using social media, but also by saying that their movement was basically defeated due to Whitey getting mad at them for trying to make things fair. Now, despite the fact that this narrative would maybe sound semi-plausible if you were completely clueless about social media and were a massive racist or sexist that doesn't understand that Black people and women have been on the internet as long as I can remember it being popular, which was the 1990s, it's also pretty much just untrue on every level. You see, the left, which I posit is a poorly constructed philosophical device held together by intersectional feminist Marxism with a dash of postmodernism for lubrication, has become the establishment in media, academia, and on social media, slowly increasing for decades, but really, it became solidified in the zeitgeist this decade, especially in 2012, to the point where I feel it's worthwhile to actually start calling it a linguistically conservative position, which I do plan on making an entire video about how the left and feminism is the conservative position if you look at the linguistic characteristics of the word conservative as opposed to liberal. But that's another topic for another video. You see, the dominant cultural narrative went from being that most people would actively proclaim themselves anti-racists if asked, or that they largely aligned with feminist principles if asked, to what it is now, where if you aren't reminding everybody you know that you're both of those things regularly on social media, you're usually going to be bullied by large groups of people. Everybody who is at all tuned into culture has started to realize this by now, including middle-aged mothers from small-town Georgia who watch my channel and write me regular private messages on Facebook, who recently told me that one of her longtime friends turned into what she describes as an SJW, despite her having told me maybe 6 months to a year ago that she didn't actually know any SJWs IRL. However, of course, while the left gets to sit around all day clogging our Facebook timeline with racist propaganda from MTV's Decoded and BuzzFeed, they still have the audacity to claim at every moment that they can that the right is actually the establishment. Because reasons. From what I can tell, after observing this for years and thinking deeply about why some people seem to actually believe this, it has to do only partially with the fact that the current government is dominated by Republicans. But even further than that, and probably much more importantly, it has to do with the foundational premise of the intersectional feminist postmodern left, which is built pretty much entirely around racism towards white people and sexism against men. Obviously, the left at large believes that white males run everything, which is due to the fact that males work longer hours than females on average, and there are more whites than anybody else in Western nations, but still, logic aside, this means to this type of leftist that even though the dominant cultural ethos relentlessly demonizes white men, propagated often by white males themselves, this type of leftist can still claim that white men are the establishment because of their majority status as wealth holders and politicians. Then, eventually, when pop culture becomes saturated with racist racial minorities and sexist women like it has been for the past 6 years, and we know that this is actively encouraged by a seeming majority of corporate media and sometimes even the federal government, these same leftist corporate-backed media companies can just go ahead and make the claim that what's really happening is simply that the oppressed are finally having access to speaking about their oppression. As if black people and women only got on the internet or on television in 2012. Coincidentally, right after Obama legalized the usage of propaganda on the American people, and of course, once the oppressed finally did get on Twitter, it turned out that every woman and even black person on the internet was also an intersectional feminist. Of course, it's hard to count all of the different ways in which that narrative is simply wrong. It would be kind of like saying that due to the advent of Tumblr, gays and lesbians finally have a voice that the whole world can hear, as if we didn't before. And by the way, we aren't actually even gay and lesbian anymore, but we're mostly non-binary identified straight white girls no older than 23. Truthfully, what I find most striking about this narrative that black people and women have allegedly just now found a voice on social media is not just the monolithic way that it paints all these millions of people as having the same opinions, but obviously the way in which it simply acts like black people and women weren't using the internet until 2012 or whatever. This simply isn't true by any means, and while maybe I can see the possibility that a huge percentage of black people did start using the internet around 2012, it just strikes me as an incredibly racist thing to say that so many people are willing to accept that there wasn't any sort of well-established black internet presence prior, and that once one became prevalent, they all felt the exact same way about basically literally everything, and that they were all feminists. And let's not even get me started about women on the internet, because we all know that women were always on the internet. Truthfully, when I think about my black friends who I would consider to be relatively normal on Facebook and what they tend to share most often, it's commonly the same types of things that most normal white people share. It's Deadpool memes, status updates about their families, and for whatever reason, it seems like all of my black friends love Japanese animation. Social justice bloggers and activists would have you believe that somehow this doesn't represent the true voice of the oppressed or something, and that maybe these black people have such horrible internalized racism that they don't know how to spend their valuable internet time, where they should be theoretically engaged in call-out culture and hashtag wars all day, every day. Obviously, social justice bloggers have no problem doing things like telling black people that sharing memes about the hilariousness of the fact that LeBron James has like 20 different fancy man purses is something that true oppressed black people shouldn't really be doing. But of course, they want to tell black people how to act online because intersectionals are racist. What else is new? Even further than that, what really annoys me is the fact that there are so many well-known black people in media now that speak out against the social justice mentality. Like some black guy, Candace Owens, Tree of Logic, That Guy T, and even Kanye West at this point, and each and every one of them is being told the same thing. That they don't count, and that they've sold out their people, etc. How many black people do we have to count before a single one of them starts to actually count? How many thousands or millions of fans do they have to have? They're obviously doing the same thing to guys like myself in terms of being gay, but whatever, I don't want to talk about myself. How many before it counts, leftists, in terms of black people especially? That's what I'm asking you. Countless black people have come out and said, no, MTV's Decoded does not speak for me. It's fluff designed to train upper middle class people in the art of sounding non-offensive to upper middle class people, but it does less than nothing to combat racism and actually makes things worse. But you keep ignoring them. If the voices of the oppressed are finally being heard on the internet, why on earth are you actively smearing them, attempting to silence them, and telling people that they don't count? I don't know. It all sounds pretty suspect to me, but let me know in the comments and stay tuned.